Well, hello there, amazing business owners, creatives, photographers. Welcome to another episode of Business Straight Up, with a podcast for the creatives in the world that own businesses that want to actually make a living doing what they love. I cannot wait for you to hear today's conversation. Now, before I tell you what we're going to talk about, I do need to tell you that I accidentally mispronounced our amazing guest's name. Her name is Debora, not Deborah. So please accept my sincerest apologies. We talked about it afterwards, and I just want to make sure that you know her name is Debora Jones. So today's conversation is going to be about something that so many creatives are terrified of. We're going to talk about sales. Dun, dun, dun. I feel like we need some dramatic music there. So many creatives are afraid of sales. We have this idea in our head that sales is somehow shady or slimy, when the reality is that everything that you are wearing, everything that you see around you, whether you're in your car, in your office, in your home, all of it was sold to you. Even ideas are sold to you. Anytime you offer value for your clients, your customers, based on what you do or the product or service that you provide, you can expect value in return, right? Which is typically money. That's how we make revenue. That's how we make a business. That's how we make a living. And today we are going to talk all about sales and the risk and the rejection and the fear that comes along with all of it. So again, I am so sorry I mispronounced her name, but today's guest is Debora Jones, and I cannot wait for you to hear this conversation. If you are afraid of sales, buckle up, Buttercup, because I promise you are going to be amazed by today's episode. Hey there, awesome people. I am Brooke Summer, and you are listening to Business Straight Up, the podcast for creative entrepreneurs to learn, connect, grow, and build the business and life that they dream of. Welcome, let's get going and dive right in. Welcome back, amazing business owners, creatives, photographers, to another episode of Business Straight Up, the podcast for creative business owners who want to actually make a living doing what they love. I am so excited to have you here today. Thank you for joining me. Today's guest is an awesome businesswoman who is an expert in sales, which is something that I know so many of my students struggle with. Debora Jones is a strategic executive and business owner with expertise in driving revenue, building resonating services, market engagement, customer management, and operations. And if you heard that and you just kind of checked out and got a little scared, don't press stop. Revenue, services, engagement, and operations are something that every business needs, not just in the corporate world. They just look a little different when it comes to smaller businesses, but they're still so necessary. So keep listening. Thank you so much for being here today, Debora.
Thanks for having me, Brooke.
I know more about your backstory and your why, but can you share with listeners a little more about who you are, what brought you to where you're at, and what your journey has looked like along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually started out my career as a lawyer from a little 6-year-old who wanted to change the world. I dreamed of making this big impact. So I went off to law school, and with being born in an immigrant family, being a doctor or a lawyer were my only two choices, right? So I felt like lawyer was the way to go. So that's what I did. And quickly I realized that making decisions when you're 6 for the rest of your life are probably not the best decisions to continue to follow.
What?
So, I know, PSA. But I practiced law for several years, tried both a big firm and a small firm, kind of tried to find my way, and finally realized, look, this isn't working and I need to do something drastically different. So I undertook a what to do next. What am I good at? Where am I going to find passion? And ultimately do what I often do, which is bet on people. Met somebody I really connected with that had a small-ish business. It was about 40 employees at the time, about 7 million in revenue. So not a startup, but not a large corporation, and just said, hey, I'm going to join this company as a salesperson.
Nice.
And that's what I did. Yeah. So I spent more than a decade there, grew the company from 7 million to 150 plus annual revenue. Did a
What?
number of roles there. It was awesome. And then I got that feeling again. Something wasn't just working. I wasn't passionate every
Yes.
day. I wasn't having enough time with my girls. So earlier this year, I blew that career up, did something totally different. Now work with my husband. We have a small business. There are two of us plus several part-time employees. And we work in the education space, working with PTAs, providing apparel to schools. It lets me be at home more with my kids. It lets us have a flexible schedule, and we get to work a lot with volunteers at schools in the education space.
I love that. And I have so many questions for you about sales, and we are going to like dive totally into sales. But I want to go back to something that you had talked about getting that feeling that something needs to change. And I feel like so many of us ignore this, right? Like we just kind of
Yep.
go through life because it's comfortable. So, what gave you the courage? Where did you learn that, you know what, when I feel that feeling, I can go for it and everything will be okay?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think first is to your point, listening for the feeling,
Hmm.
identifying the feeling. Like I describe the feeling almost like, when an oyster is made by a piece of sand getting in the shell and like irritating, I almost like feel that in my life. And
Yes.
that little irritation, I'm wiggling right now for those of you who are just listening, that little irritation where like it's just not flowing, listening for that. And then asking yourself a lot of questions, talking it through with people. What is this? Is it just something in the current role or is it something broader? I think listening for that, identifying that is part of what gives you the courage because then you feel, okay, I've identified the problem, right? And then the
Mhm.
next step is taking action. And I think that is really about believing in yourself and knowing that making a big change is super scary, but growth comes from it and positivity comes from it. And even if the change ultimately you look back and feel like it wasn't the right move, you did still learn a lot from it and you will make another change, right? Nothing is so
Yes.
permanent that you can't continue from that step onto the next step. And I think knowing
That's
that and
hard.
having confidence in yourself is the key.
That's really hard. I feel like so many of us think that, and I'm including myself in this, that when we make a decision or make a big change, that that's it. Like you don't get to
Yeah,
change back.
right.
And it's
And it's
just
not
not
true.
true. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
it's an evolution, right? It's
Yes.
a process. And I don't know how many of your listeners may have read the book Who Moved My Cheese, but I do feel like it is a book that helped me through change a little bit. Are you familiar with it?
I am. Yes.
So, as you know, it's about four characters and it's a super short read. Like, I
Mhm.
gave it to one of my employees once who read it on the subway ride home and, he was done. So, quick read for those of you who may or may not have read it. And it's about four characters and identifying with those characters and how they manage through change. I just found that book gave me comfort in knowing that I can manage through any change and I can adjust and that every change brings opportunity and opportunity tends to have positive outcomes.
Yes. And can we just like honor the fact that 2020, that might be our biggest lesson?
Yeah, you think?
Is that we can work through change and we can figure it out, even when it's scary, even when we're huddled in the corner of our office crying for 20 minutes because something happened. You
Right.
get up and you put your big girl pants on, put your lipstick on, and you face the day.
Absolutely. And look, change is life. We won't go
Yes.
through life without change. And there's always two sides to every coin, and we get to choose which side we spend our brain power on. And although
Yes.
that's fairly simplistic, because sometimes you're so emotionally in it that it's hard to bring yourself over to the other side of the coin. But I do think we have the power and ability to change our own wavelengths, change our own patterns, and even with simple things like speaking to yourself in the mirror, like I will not see the negative right now. I'm just going to look at the positive and repeating the positive of that change. Even little things like that can be helpful.
Absolutely. I absolutely love that. I feel like for anyone listening, we are recording this at the end of 2020, but it will likely go live in the beginning of 2021. And the lessons that we are learning this year through the things that, first of all, we thought we had control over, but we never really did, right?
Yeah,
Like it was an
absolutely.
illusion. And so learning that when these changes happen, that we can still move forward is huge. And that is something that courage inside of us can help us so much.
Totally agree. I mean, there's nothing like a global pandemic to shake things up and prove that even everything you thought you had control over, you don't.
Right? Oh my gosh. So let's talk more about sales because this is a word that can strike fear into the heart of creative business owners, which is so funny to me because I tell my students all the time everything that you are currently wearing or that you are surrounded with, your phone, your car, wherever you're listening, was actually sold to you. Whether it was directly
Yeah.
or indirectly, everything was sold to you, and people freak out about sales. So many creatives have this aversion to sales, this fear, this idea that selling what they do or create is somehow slimy or shady. Can you speak a little bit about that? Why is selling essential for all business owners, especially creatives?
It's how you get your word out, right? It's
Right?
how you create win-win situations. I mean, I think that sales was once a scary word to me. I was a lawyer, right? I wasn't about sales. Sales was Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross, coffee is for closers, like not something that I thought of myself as. However, when it comes down to it, it's really just about finding solutions to problems, right?
Yes.
You know, the problem of I have no clothes in my closet is solved by the salesperson at Macy's, right?
Right?
Um, and it's a win-win for both of us. I need the clothes. She, has a number to hit that day or that year or whatever. And so for creatives, I mean, it's the same thing. You have this amazing power, this amazing creativity to change a life through whatever your medium is. And so sales is about finding the person who needs that changing, who derives value from whatever you have. And I think if you spend time in yourself thinking about creating these win-win situations and how you are just out there partnering with somebody to solve a need, that's what sales is. It doesn't have to be this dirty word, this bad thing.
Absolutely. And the reality is that sales and marketing go so closely hand in hand because marketing is really just selling the idea of what you do, right? Like it's the
Right.
same thing. It's you're just solving a problem. And so many creatives have this idea of I just love what I create. I want everyone to have it for free. And the reality is that while I would love for everyone to have what I create for free as well, I am providing a value to someone and that value has a reciprocation to it, right?
Absolutely. And you won't be able to continue to provide that value if you're not somehow compensated for it. And what I mean by that is if that's your livelihood, you need to make money to eat, to buy your supplies for whatever it is. And you won't be able to provide that value if you're not monetizing what you're doing.
Absolutely. Today's episode is brought to you by the new and improved mentoring program with Business Straight Up. If you are struggling with something specific in your business and you need help that is personalized, I am excited to announce that I have officially added mentoring one-on-one back into my business. So what the heck is mentoring? Well, the nice part is that it's custom based on you and your needs for your business. I can help you with marketing or sales or branding and so many aspects of running a business. Mentoring is really part education, part accountability, and part inspiration. I want you to walk away from a mentoring session with me feeling on top of things, with clarity on where you want to go and how to get there and the steps to take to actually make it happen. If coaching or mentoring is something that you have been thinking about, it is time to get some details to see if we're a good fit. Go to businessstraightup.com/mentoring to learn more and reach out so that we can start working together. I can't wait to see where you go in your business in 2021. Sales is something, it's so funny to me that people get super squirrely about this. But for me personally, I work with my clients very carefully and I tell them upfront we have a sales appointment after their photography session because I'm a boudoir photographer on one side, teacher on the other. And I know that not everyone runs their business this way, but this gives me the chance to step in and be their advisor and walk them through the things that they may not have even known they wanted. And I don't push them to buy something. I just present the options and let them choose. In your experience, how do you create a win-win sales situation so that all parties feel good about the entire experience?
I think it's really about listening. I mean, it's about understanding the person you're talking to. That person may or may not end up being your client, but understanding what it is that they are looking for, right? Even little things like, why did they take the call? Why did they come to this conversation? Listening for things that, to your point, they may not know they want, but are signaling. So that could be something like, you're having a conversation and they're talking about a frustration in one part of their life. And maybe after asking questions and listening a little more, you realize that one of your products may help to alleviate some frustration in that part of their life. But really having a conversation, deep listening, understanding, being curious, asking questions, that allows you to understand who you're speaking to. And then you can pair that with something that you offer. You may not be able to solve everything you've heard from them in that conversation, but it's likely that some of your services, some of your products will address some of the things that they brought up. And that's a win-win.
Yes. And so many of my students feel, well, I don't want to push them to buy something that they don't need. And the reality is that when my clients come in, sometimes they'll want something that doesn't fit in their life at the time. Like they might want a huge piece of wall art and they don't have the wall space for it. And so I kind of talk them down. And yes, it means not as much money coming into me, but I want them to trust me and to understand that I am their advisor. I am here to work with them. I'm not trying to scam them or do something that's shady or try to get them to spend money unnecessarily.
Yeah, it's really about that bigger picture, the longer term relationship, and truly
Yes.
providing a win-win. That's why I say like listening, because you
Yes.
don't want to oversell, sell something that they don't need, but it's likely that there is something in that conversation that identifies a true need that you can solve.
Yes. That listening is so key. And really, so many people will think of sales when it comes to material things, but even ideas are sold to you.
Now that's an interesting concept, but yeah, very true.
Because if you look at it's so funny. I have friends who are very anti consumerism, anti materialism, which is fine. They're very minimalist, which is awesome. But even the idea of minimalism was sold to them somehow.
It's true. And there's lots of books about minimalism. There's lots of even
Yes.
blogs about minimalism, right? Where people have monetized their blog in order to share with you how to be minimalistic. Yeah, absolutely. It's a
Isn't
great
that
point.
funny? So, objections that where sales go to die, right?
Yeah.
So, what do you do to prepare to overcome objections? And how do you start to prepare for the ones that come up most often?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first place to start there is don't get discouraged. I mean,
Yes.
sales is hard. Sales is grueling. Going out there and talking to people and hearing no or not now or even anything that you perceive as negative can be hard. And we as women, we often walk away at that point. And I think that sticking in the conversation and not getting discouraged is the first way to overcome an objection. Just because somebody says no right off the bat doesn't mean you still can't continue the conversation. I think that
Yes.
a no is a great opportunity for why. And
Yes.
that's where you ask the why. Like, why? Tell me about why you said no or why you don't think that this works for you and
Hmm.
explore that a little bit. And at that point, I think you can share some of the values of your product or your service. And so you will probably hear similar no's or not nows over and over in your business, right? People,
Hmm.
I think you made the point, people may not know that they want something, right? Or they may
Hmm.
not have the money for something right now. Those are things you probably hear over and over. So you should have jotted down some standard ways to overcome that. Just to give an example, if you hear, well, I don't have the money for this right now. Well, I absolutely understand. Here are different ways that people pay is one
Hmm.
way to overcome that. Or totally get it. When do you usually do your personal budgeting? Is this something that you may think about budgeting for next year, next quarter, next month, kind of depending on how people manage their own money? And just understanding that, but having those standard responses to objections, I think can really help you prepare and feel confident in that conversation. And then
Mm-hmm.
finally, for those things that you're hearing one off, those unique things, ask questions. That is the best way. And just because a conversation doesn't end with a successful deal, I'm doing air quotes there, in some sort
Yeah.
of sale, doesn't mean you shouldn't follow up with that person 6 months, a year, 2 months, kind of depending on your services. Keep that no as a not now and keep in touch with that person.
Definitely. And back to your point of asking why, that can also tell us a lot about where the disconnect is with our own services and offerings as well. If we keep hearing the same thing over and over again, maybe that's something we need to look at in our own operations too.
Absolutely. I think that understanding your market, your buyers, the people who are interested in your service is really critical to developing a service that resonates with people. So if price is always the objection, maybe your price is out of line, right?
Hmm.
If the objection is always that's too much of a time investment, maybe think of different ways to break up your services so that in more bite-sized pieces rather than an investment of a chunk of time. But certainly listening to the people you're speaking to can inform your services and then also help you to overcome the objections in the future.
Definitely. I know that one thing that I come across with my students a lot is when someone says that the price is too high or that something that they do is not worth the price, they take it very personally. And they see this as a almost personal attack on their own worth. Do you have
Mm-hmm.
any tips for someone who might be internalizing that as a personal attack or a personal statement of what they're worth?
That's a great question. And I think that it can be a really hurtful experience generally to get a no, especially when you're doing something creative, right? Because you're pouring so much of yourself into your work that it absolutely can feel like a personal attack. But I do recognize that your value may just not match the level of that person's need. So it's not a reflection on your value and the value of what you've put out, but more a reflection of where it lies in that person's priorities. And it's
Yes.
okay. It's not a reflection on you that that person's priorities at that moment are different.
Right.
And I think that you can respect their priority list while still continuing to do your awesome work.
Absolutely. We all know those people that never have the money to go out with friends, but they drive the nicest, newest car. Like everyone
Right?
spends in different ways, and it's not
Yep.
personal. It's never personal. It's about them. It's not about us.
Yep. Exactly. And I
So,
think sales generally, like in avoiding the internalization of the whole process, can be very helpful because it can be difficult. And I think that's why people don't like to spend a lot of time in it necessarily. But I think the more that you can compartmentalize that apart from a judgment on yourself and the actual true value of your services, I think is a good thing.
yes, absolutely. How do you handle objections that you haven't heard before? Like you're talking with a potential client and they throw something at you and you are just kind of stunned, like, what do I say to this?
In those stunned moments, tell me more is my go to.
Yes,
um,
three magic
it,
words.
exactly. First of all, it buys you some more time to process what you've just heard. But usually, if you're hearing something for the first time, you also may not understand all the nuances of it. And so, tell me more allows you to get more detail from that person and really understand like what is their objection, what are they saying, and how do I overcome it or understand that now is not the right time. Because I do think it's equally as important, and I should have probably said this before, that you won't overcome every objection, right? You're not going to hit 100% of the balls thrown at you. You will
Yes.
miss some, and that's okay. And understanding when now is not the right time for that person is also critically important. So it may be that objection after the tell me more, you come to a quick understanding that now is not the right time. It may also be that there's still an opportunity for a win win outcome, but that tell me more lets you gauge which of those two categories you're in.
Yes. I have found that tell me more can also lead you to the root cause of the
Yes.
objection because, for instance, some people might say that my photography services are too expensive, and yet they go out and spend that on their kids without thinking twice about it. So, is it really too expensive, or is it too expensive for them to spend on themselves? And that's a totally different issue.
Well, and I mean, throwing another in there, is it just not in their budget for right now? So it's
Yes.
not actually that it's too expensive, but it's just that they haven't planned for it and they are very strict planners.
Yes. And how do we, if that comes up, then address that by figuring out where does that fit into our business as far as plans and pricing and funding and all that stuff?
Exactly right. Yep.
Definitely. You probably hear or read all the time on podcasts and courses, various communities, that you need to do certain things or have specific processes in place to help with your business. Whether it's lead follow-up, email templates, or workflow, all of this can be so overwhelming, right? Especially when you don't know where to start. I have spent 15 years creating processes that are repeatable for my own business. And last year, I finally launched my online shop where my email templates, workflows, and questionnaires are all available for purchase. And just for my amazing podcast listeners, I have a special code available for you for 10% off of any product on the shop. Just head over to shopwithbrooke.com. Don't forget the E on the end of my name and use the code BSU podcast, like Business Straight Up Podcast, to get 10% off of any product, anything on the shop. Don't let overwhelm or all of the shoulds take precious hours of your time that you could spend with your family or doing what you really love. Check out the templates and pre-done systems that you can copy and paste and implement at shopwithbrooke.com to start rocking your marketing and your business today. Let's talk a little bit about the sales that aren't as obvious. And I kind of alluded to this earlier, but marketing ourselves and offering what we do to the world to people who might love to be a part of it. And really, marketing and sales are just putting ourselves out there and giving someone the opportunity to pay us for the value that we provide. And yet, that very idea of asking someone to to hire us or buy from us is so scary. What are some tips or tricks you've worked on in the marketing side, the first point of sales when it comes to our businesses?
Yeah, that's a great question. There is a lot you can do on the marketing side, and I think it depends on your business. In the creative space, I definitely think getting onto visual mediums, whether it's Instagram or even YouTube through videos, is really critical because often your services are sold through a picture. People seeing and being able to really emotionally connect with what you're providing is really critically important. And so I think having visible profiles in the right social media platforms for your business. I do think it's worth looking at running ads in those spaces to get your name out there, setting your ad budget, being pretty strict about it so that you're within your means on what you want to spend in the marketing space. But I do think that is important. I then think that there's some more creative ways that you can market, whether that is through partnerships. So finding other similar businesses that may not do the same set of services, but like adjacent services. So if you're a photographer, for example, but you may not create canvas or even metal work from your images, partnering with somebody who does do that. And then you guys can refer back and forth, or partnering with somebody who does fashion, who's able to help somebody dress for a photo shoot, doing some partnerships like that where there's cross referrals. I think that you can put out thought leadership in your area, whether that's doing a podcast like we're talking about today, whether that's blogging, whether that's getting an article published in a magazine of some sort, but putting your name out there as an expert in the space, I think is also another great way to market. And then creating lists of interested parties and getting content out to them on a regular basis, I think is the last way. So if I think about it, as this funnel where up at the top, you're kind of getting your brand out there through advertising. And then next, you're getting a little more specific by partnering with other businesses and going to their client list. In other words, they're sharing out with their clients.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, even more specific with direct marketing to people who have indicated an interest in your services. I think those are some really good ways to get people into the direct conversations then with you. Take the next step.
Absolutely. Yes, it's so funny. You basically just listed like so many things I teach in my marketing course because
Great.
it's a sales tool, right? Like you're
Yes.
selling, when you're marketing, you're putting yourself out there and saying, this is what I have to offer. If you would like to be a part of that, here's how you contact me. And it's just another vehicle for sales, selling to someone that has already expressed interest. It's just a different type of experience, but it comes down to the same thing. Here's what I have to offer. Would you like it or not?
Yep. Look, the whole process from the beginning of marketing, like that top end of the funnel that I mentioned, all the way down to making a sale is really all about being organized and numbers. And what I mean by that is you may reach 1,000 people with your ads.
Mm-hmm.
Then only 200 will attend or listen to your podcast. Right? And then only 50 will read the newsletter you send. And then only 10 will reach out to you for a one-on-one conversation or, you set up a one-on-one conversation. And then only one of those 10 will buy. But in order to get to that one, you have to reach out to that 1,000, right? And so it really is making sure you're organized about, okay, how do I make sure I'm spending time on each of these sections in that funnel? And how do I make sure I'm moving people along so that I'm able to have conversations with those people that I'm touching out there in the 1,000-person advertising campaign?
Yes. I can't remember the exact quote, but Ash Amberjay in her book, The Middle Finger Project, says something like, the more offers you make, the more yeses you can get. It's really just a numbers game. That's it.
It is. Yeah.
That's really hard for some of us to embrace.
Fair. And it's also can be, to your earlier point, it can be emotionally challenging to think 999 people are rejecting me. Mm-hmm. Right? Out of that 1,000 that I shared my advertisement with. And I think it's important to not look at it that way, right? Because it's like the one is the person that I'm really able to make an impact on. And the impact is so meaningful. And the decisions that those 999 make are their own decisions with their own priorities, but I made an impact on this one life and created this win-win scenario here. And I think focusing on the one is important.
Absolutely. And for the other 999, if it really bothers you that much, you can look at it for a little bit and decide what you can learn from it.
Yep.
So that when you tweak it in the future, maybe it'll be 998 or 997. And every time you get a little better at what you're doing.
Absolutely. I think learning from all elements of your experience as an entrepreneur, especially lots of learnings. I know I've had a year full of them and it's great, right? I've had a career full of them before that, but in the entrepreneurial space, definitely a year of getting better at things.
Yes. I think that one reason so many creative business owners are really reluctant when it comes to sales is that there is an inherent risk of rejection. And that is one of our biggest, we just really, really, really want to stay away from rejection. I mean, think about just asking someone out on a date. The reason so many people don't is rejection, right? And these risks can be so scary sometimes. How can we change our mindset around that risk to start to lessen the fear so that we see these risks opportunities instead of these terrifying situations that we want to avoid?
I think focusing on the one win is one way to do it. Mm-hmm. I also think putting the risks in perspective, the risk of not making any sales and your business going belly up is probably bigger than the risk of rejection.
Right? Choose your risk.
So let's focus on being scared of that risk if we have to choose a risk to be scared of. If that's the way you want to paint it. But I think really focusing on the positive. Look, as an entrepreneur, things can be lonely. things can feel really hard. And then adding sales on top of that can feel even harder. And I think it's really a challenge to stay in the positive. But I do think repeating positive mantras, surrounding yourself by positive people, not only in like your friend group, but I mean other entrepreneurs. Or I have a concept that I call a career advisory board. And, I have people in my own career advisory board that I reach out to run business ideas by, and making sure that those people are really supportive. And so for your listeners who may like that concept, have somebody with some sales experience in your advisory board, in your personal advisory board. And whenever you get down about something or feel like you don't want to go out there and push yourself, reach out to that person and know that they will give you some positive words of encouragement in that sales space. And I think really turn that negativity, those potential risks, into opportunities. It's really staying focused on the positive, staying focused on how you will never impact that one life if you don't reach out to the 1,000, and really being maniacally focused on that.
That's so crazy important. And think about, like, it may just seem like if you're only impacting one life, well, it's just one, but think about now all of the people that one could now impact because of it. What if their kids have a different mindset now, and you're now changing the next generation because you reached out to help someone else?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really important. The reverberations that one has.
Yes.
Really critical.
So what happens when we take a risk and it doesn't work out and we fall flat on our faces and we feel like we failed and life is over?
Yeah, it's a good question. The book that always pops into mind for me here is "Oh, the Places You'll Go" by Dr. Seuss.
I love that book.
Isn't it a great book? And there's at one point in the book, like, it's all positive, everything's going really well. And then there's a page that is like, except for when it doesn't, right? And that's exactly what we're talking about right now, except for when it doesn't. And it won't, right? Like, it won't always go well. You will sometimes swing and miss. And that's okay. That, like you said earlier, learning from that, looking at it, saying, what could I have done differently? Sometimes the answer is nothing. And that's great. That means you're doing a really good job. Sometimes the answer is, I could have spent more time understanding why they were saying no. I could have phrased something better. I could have better explained my services in my marketing earlier on, so that this person was sort of weeded out as not being interested earlier on. There's a lot of different learnings you may come to, but I think taking that moment, thinking about, okay, why did things not go well here? And then looking again to the positive, but I have had wins in the past. This is just one drop in a bucket of water, or in a pool, or in a sea even, right? And I'm not going to let that one drop have a ripple effect on the whole, body of water. I need to just learn and move on. And I think putting that in your Rolodex of learnings and then moving on is really, really important. And different people process that differently. You may need to talk through it with somebody. You may need to write it down. Whatever it is, I think that quickly understanding what you can learn and then refocusing yourself on the positive is what you should do in that when it doesn't work out space.
Yes. And I have found for myself personally, I'm an empath. And so I struggle with an overwhelm of emotions, and I have to feel through those to really process it. But I set a timer for myself for 15, 20 minutes, and I let myself cry and scream and be upset and be sad or be angry or whatever. And then once that timer goes off, you move forward.
Yeah. I think that's a great strategy.
Because if you wallow in it, it doesn't change.
And again, going back to, you will never get to impact that one life if you're focused on one of those 999, right?
Yes.
You will never get to that. You'll never realize your potential if you don't just move on.
I saw a quote on social recently that said, right now, you are the answer to someone else's prayers. And that really hit me. You do have the opportunity to impact even that one person.
Yeah. And the faster you can get to that one person, the better.
Right? Oh my gosh, that's so important. And so many people are just so afraid of sales. And for someone that is terrified to actually sell what they do or create in the world, what is, if you could only tell them one thing, one piece of advice, and you're like, you have to do this, what would it be?
Just do it. Borrowing from Nike.
Right?
I think you just have to take that first jump.
Yes.
I think it can be really hard, but you're not going to get there if you don't. And I also do think, I've talked to people in the past who have never quite been able to take that first jump. For example, in starting your own business. And I think if that's you, I think take a minute to think about, are you really passionate about this? Is this something you actually want to do? Because if there's something that is consistently stopping you, it may be that moment where the sand has gotten in the oyster shell and maybe it's not quite right. Maybe you need to rejigger things because maybe there really is something there and there's a reason why you're not going forward. But so long as you've cleared that out and it's really just sales that is, preventing you from making that leap, I think you just have to do it. If it means talking to somebody else, somebody holding your hand while you launch that first ad, make that first phone call, send that first email, you got to follow the Nike principle of just do it, and it will become easier after those first few times.
Because taking action is what helps us gain that clarity that we all want to have of what should I do next, but you will never know until you take that action.
Great.
Oh my gosh, to all of the listeners and awesome business owners that have joined us, thank you so much for listening today. I am truly honored that you press play and spent this time with Debora and I. If you are someone that loves helping other people and you know someone who can use this information, maybe you know a business owner who's just really scared right now to put herself out there, please forward this episode over to them. If you are thinking, wow, this content was amazing, Brooke, how can I thank you? Can you head on over to iTunes and leave a review? I know it seems small and it takes a few minutes, but those reviews help me to know exactly how I can better serve you. And it helps us to get amazing guests like Debora. So hit pause now, leave a review. And if you screenshot your review before hitting submit and email it to hello@businessstraightup.com, I will send you a free gift. So please, please, please leave those reviews so that we can continue kicking ass with great content every week. Thank you so much for being here, Debora. For anyone that wants to hear more and they're like, you are speaking my language, I need help with this, where can they connect with you and learn more about you?
Absolutely. I also co-host a podcast called The Multipurpose Room, which they can find out more about at themultipurposeroom.school. And you can message me straight there, or you can send me a note at my business email, which is djones@k12clothing.com.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for being here today. And for everyone listening today, I want to know, what is the scariest part of sales for you? And what are you going to do in the next month to start overcoming that? That's your homework. Let me know in the community at businessstraightup.com/community. Keep moving forward, learning and taking action on all of your biggest goals, even through the challenges and chaos that have been facing all of us for the past year. I can't wait to see what you do with your business and how you change the world. Thank you again, Debora.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Have an amazing rest of your day, and we will talk soon. Thank you so much for listening to Business Straight Up. I'm so glad that you could join us today. Check out the show notes for this and all of the episodes at businessstraightupodcast.com. And I can't wait to talk with you again. Have a great day.